Excellent. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, good night, wherever you are. We've had colleagues from as far as Dublin and Belfast, and on one side in San Francisco and San Diego on the other. We've had our dear friend Bill Cleveland and the Orcas Islands, and our friends down in Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia, Philip Mallory Jones, join us. Welcome to Animating Democracy, a series that is sponsored by the Giant Company in association with our collaborators at the Dauphin County Library System. We are in the salon of the Thomas Morris Chester Welcome Center and Research Collection. Thomas Morris Chester was the first African-American to work for a major newspaper. He worked for the Philadelphia newspapers during the Civil War and was also the first African-American barrister or lawyer in the British system. He helped to start 3 high schools and spent the end of his life in New Orleans. This is a multi-purpose room that is a intimate cabaret stage on one side, a classroom on another, a research center on the third side, and an opportunity for us to present and exchange with colleagues through this open studio on this side. This is the 7th of an 8-part series. If you just joined us, we started this series 15 years ago, based upon the old folkloric thing that your grandmother used to say, well, live and learn, child, live and learn. So this is the live and learn, each one teach one, each one bring one back into the sun series. Each evening we present first a spotlight artist who is a rising star in the constellation of art makers. We introduce change agents who are on the front line, and national and international thought leaders who bring us global thinking, global strategies, and global vocabulary. I want to introduce to you Keisha Finnie, who will be joining us in the spotlight, and I am so glad to present this kind lady and invite her to, as her place in the constellation to shine. I first discovered her work in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I'm learning to say Lancaster instead of Lancaster. That's a big giveaway that you're not from there. But upon taking the seat as the chairman of the Public Arts Advisory Board, the week later, the nation shut down with COVID, and we invited artists in those first 4 weeks of 2020 to create messages to be placed all over the village, messages about keeping hope, keeping safe. And it was the first time I was introduced to her work. I am happy to say that I met that work again through her collaborations with F&M, and again with a project called the Way Station Project that she'll tell you about, and with the work that she's doing around central Pennsylvania. Keisha, you refer to yourself as a fine artist, correct?
Yes.
What is a fine artist? Let's get some vocabulary up here. So we're.
I mean, yeah, I would say artist, fine artist. I feel like as an artist, calling myself a certain thing puts me kind of in a box. So I do a lot of different things. you saw my work as the mural that I did for COVID, the Nurture Your Mind mural, and that was actually a kind of new experience for me as an artist to kind of add that to my tool belt, let's say. So yeah, I first started doing canvas work, so I feel like that is the realm in which I would like my career to go, but I like being able to do murals, I do henna tattoos as well, so I do a
Yes,
lot
and,
of things as an
let me
artist.
catch up with you, good sister, because at that point, you were working in what we refer to as intimate work that required large scale work, and we were persistent, Kim Chan, to make sure that sign painters, billboard painters, people who did large commercial work were not eligible to apply. It had to be, quote, fine artists. But we were out on a tightrope there, what we defined it. So that's why I ask you how in a community where there are a lot of wall painters, billboard painters, commercial painters, how you distinguish the fine art as being not of the issues of the scale of the work, but the kind of vantage or vision of the work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. But yeah, I think I would consider myself a fine artist because most likely you would see my work in a gallery. Not to say that it's not as accessible as public art, which I'm still learning and immersing myself into.
And I thought that was one of the interesting things about your collaboration, because other artists who were selected to do those first COVID billboards collaborated with you in the whole issue of, would you talk about a bit about how Adam and some of the other artists that were selected also worked together? And
Yeah, so that experience was a crazy one to say the least. Being that it was my first large scale piece of work. Adam and I have talked prior to that, but we weren't as close, and we didn't get as close as we have gotten and how we are now before this project. But Adam really did help me a lot, being that he it does a lot of mural work, and I always call him my sensei because I can call on him whenever I have a question about murals or things of that nature that I'm not really used to or I've learned yet. So it was really nice to have the support of the other artists. And then we also had a Facebook group that we were all posting in as well. So it was nice to see everyone working on their work at the same time, which kind of pushed me along to finally make the deadline and get it finished in time.
for me, the most exciting part of it was how you all established a community. And community is a word that we'll use a lot tonight. But when we say the community, today I've been of 5 different communities, and I got 2 more to go before I go to bed. So it changes. But these few of you knew each other when you started this process. Each of you were
Mhm.
in that process of, quote, competing with each other for the commissions. But talk a little bit about the process that rose out of good evening. Come in, come in, come in. We're just joined by another great artist, Susan Anthony. Uh, but we're talking about we are so used to competing with each other in these fellowship and grant processes to come out on the other side and collaborate with the other artists. If you talk about what was the value of that and the impact of that.
Yeah, since then, that project, the community and the art community has been so supportive, and I met so many artists since that opportunity. So the to have that support and people who understand what you're doing and how hard the work actually is, it's really great to be able to sit back or to call on any one of them at any time and they can completely relate to what you're going through. And we were all at this time during COVID and all inside, so not really meeting each other. And some of the artists, I'm not sure if I've met every artist that did a COVID mural in person actually, but I'm still meeting people over that time period of them knowing me from Instagram and then making that connection. And I feel like it solidifies being an artist and having that community.
So affirmations, confirmations, technical assistance and support from other people who you were used to competing with. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
800 applications, 400 are reviewed, 20 go to final, and 8 get picked to create a mural. And I think 5 weeks or 4 weeks you
For the COVID mural, they actually only
yeah.
gave us 10 days.
Oh, yes, because of the installation. We primed the
They
boards,
gave us
we
10
dropped them
days.
off. They had to also work in different places because we couldn't gather. It was literally 2.5 weeks after the March 13th shutdown. I want to come back and talk about things like the affirmation, the confirmation at a time of isolation. And I know that visual artists work in isolation. That is, so working in your studio and working in isolation was a norm for you. But
Oh, yes.
how did COVID affect your sense of isolation and your need for
For me,
response?
the only thing that was different, because me being an artist, like you said, we're used to isolating and being by ourselves anyway. So I was like, this is prime time for me. I was loving it. I was loving being off of work, so I could have time to actually do my art. Um, but yeah, I think the only thing that was hard for me was actually being able to get supplies when I needed, because things were so weird and stores were closed, but they just started opening things kind of back up. But it was like when you were doing curbside pickup. So, and a lot of things were all being sold out because everyone's sitting inside and becoming more creative. So it was great in that sense that people who aren't normally creative were picking up skills that they kind of forgotten as an adult. So to see that and see art be the main thing that we're all digesting at this time, whether it be visual art that we're doing out in the community or TV or music, all of those things is is a form of art. So I feel like that really showed the times that we were in and how important it actually is in the work that we're creating.
It was great. And as you talk about working on uh, realization of scale, of the scale of your work, working from gallery and wall to mural and major side, what did you discover about your work working in that size?
That is still a really big intimidation for me, actually working on a big scale. I might not be able to show, or people might not be able to see that from me posting and just keep doing the things that I do. But yeah, but a lot of it is trial and error and reaching out to those friends that I have made over the last few years in the community who aren't scared to share information and help each other along, because there's so much opportunities for all of us, and we all have different kinds of art. So for us to be able to come together on certain projects and help each other out, I think it really makes a big impact and showing others that it is possible.
Now you work on both the large scale now as a result of this, but you also work very intimate and use the body as the canvas. And talk about your work on skin and work on your body art and your body work.
Yeah, so henna tattoos were a very big thing in the 90s and something that I have experienced growing up, going to the beach every year as a child. But as an artist, I was always like, since I'm self-taught, I was like, I can teach myself how to do this, I think, and not have to pay anybody. So that was the main reason why I started doing henna. But my part-time job before I went full-time as an artist, I was working at a hair salon. And also doing henna tattoos there because it was a natural salon and I do natural henna. So it kind of made sense for me to have that there. And then I started meeting women who were on like PTO school boards, and I was invited to do henna for post proms. I've the first festival that I did was the Buchanan Festival that they used to have at Buchanan Park before COVID happened. So since then, it's just kind of been like an ongoing thing that I do, and I do parties, any kinds of events or girls' nights, you name it. I think it's always a hit.
Well, I want to go back and talk about what used to be that ain't there no more. We have a song in New Orleans called "Ain't There No More." You sing out about remember Ralph's ain't there no more. Remember Connie's ain't there no more. So we want to get into the ain't there no more collision after COVID. But while this construct of COVID was going on, there was also the explosion of Black Lives Matter. And you and an incredible bunch of BIPOC artists poured into the streets. And would you talk about that, that time and that learning experience?
Yeah, that experience, I was actually just talking about this because I'm actually writing a grant where I have to talk about this experience that kind of changed my life. But yeah, this was a opportunity that I never thought that I had the capacity to do, or ever thought that would be me leading other artists on a mural project. So initially, after the killing of George Floyd, all these protests were happening, and at the time, I was speaking to the woman, Joe Davis, who was on the public art board, and we were talking about creating some kind of art in this time. So we decided to have a mural of George Floyd and the faces who were lost in the past over police brutality. Um, so Adam was one of the artists as well, Kirsten Jordan, Justin Jones, Kaya Hobbs. So Adam initially, I sent him all these images and he did his graphic design work, and we printed all of these images out and then did a wheat pasting mural throughout the day. And it was a crazy day. Like, it was super hot, and in the background you can hear everybody chanting, walking down the streets as we're creating this art. So just the feeling of the community and the power of the messages that we were essentially showing the world and creating for the history of Lancaster and the times that we were in, it was it was life changing for me as an artist. But I feel like
You know, those of you who are
mhm.
out there in our virtual audience and have followed the series for all this time know that I love to quote Frederick Douglass and his speech, agitate, agitate, agitate. And the artists in your community were really agitators in the best and most aggressive way. What did you learn from them that affected your work? The inspiration, the animation, the agitation of that community.
I just learned like the sense of the community and to come together, and how much power that I really do have, and how much of a voice that I really had after this experience, and not even knowing, and just the work that I'm creating and how many people and lives it touched.
So now you're involved in several projects. Talk about some of the things that fill your day and fill your dreams. And
Wow, since then I've done so much work. Yeah, I've since then I've done countless murals. I've done a mural in Concrete Rose down in the southeast area in Lancaster, the Black-owned winery and book bar by Vida and Solis. Um, yeah, so I've done that mural. I've done the mural at the Mix, the Legacy mural. I've done a few pianos with MFE, and also did another mural for them as well. While COVID was happening and they couldn't have the pianos out, I painted instruments as well for the first time. Um, I've actually was a scenic artist at Tate Towers for the first time as well, and I actually got called back recently. I had two solo exhibitions. I'm now curating my own BIPOC exhibition that's coming up in May for the Art Walk, Lancaster Art Walk, and that's like the first time ever. So I'm hoping that will be great. But yeah, I do lots of things. So I have to do admin work. I'm writing grants for myself now, and just learning a bunch of ins and outs of the art world and my career.
Now I gotta help us out with this, friends. And I've, I've been saying this for a couple decades now. We're writing applications. They give us grants. You know, the document is an application and not a grant. And the grant making is about the art of rejection. Okay, so you have to have thick skin in grant making. In the first place, you start is realizing that what you sent in is not the grant. The letter you get back is the grant. And so the construction, I wish you good luck, because the construction of your application should be a piece of art also. The
Oh
way it
yes, I'm
unfolds, you
I'm learning
know,
that, and I'm so thankful for all the people around that can help me navigate this new world. So it's yeah, it's a new one to learn, but
yes, yes, ma'am.
The thing that I learned with grant making, and it was a hard thing to learn, is when you're writing something like that, you have to put the process, which is the easier part, to the side. It's really the purpose. It's really presenting to those that you're hoping will give you money as to why. Why would I give anyone money for anything? And explaining so that someone can feel your power in deciding to fund you. So the purpose is the substance, the content is much more important than the process. You know, we're going to do it on Thursday, and we're going to have a morning thing that we do this, and then in the afternoon we're going to prepare this. That's like the icing on the cake, but it is purpose driven. And I think that's the hard thing. But once you do that, don't you find you then sort of have a bit of a template that you can use again and again and again, and further develop it and go deeper and deeper into why it is that you think this is important and why other people should think it's important too.
I think that that's a very important thing. One other thing, sister, the application should be like the preparation of your canvas or the detail in your henna work, you know, that
yeah, like the sketch, let's say.
yes, the
Yeah,
application has to have it in the DNA of all of the project, because it is a competitive process. But also, uh, I believe that it is also the only diagnostic exercise that we as gig artists have. The application is also a measurement of how you translate your work, evaluate your work, designate what its cost and its time, its impact and its outcome was. So don't only think of the application as for them, but for you too. It's like getting an x-ray of yourself or taking a photo of yourself, you know, and we don't like this pose, you know, we need to go a little bit here, a little more like. So it's a work in progress, and every now and then there's a buyer. Yeah, like, but the evaluation is as important. I'm gonna come back to a number of those things. If you would allow me to change the order slightly, I think I'd like Brendan to speak next, because he will also talk about the collaboration that his organization has had with Keisha Finnie. We are very pleased that we have the support of Amtrak to have in-station exhibition.
yes.
And Keisha Finnie just did an installation of painted instruments and repurposing and reinterpreting through visualization of effort and shape and line and design in space. And it was a very successful exhibition in the Amtrak station of the
Yeah, it
Lancaster.
was great.
It was great.
I had so much great feedback from that. It was great painting those, and it's so super fun working with MFE because I get to paint on different surfaces that I'm not used to. but yeah, I always see it as a challenge. So yeah, it's always fun working with
So,
them.
so please stay with us and jam with us in this conversation, Keisha, with Brendan. We'll add people as we go along. Brendan, welcome, sir. It's always great to see you, and hope your children are doing well this evening. We're applauding Father's Month here.
Thank
Okay.
you. Yeah, they're on the upswing. Thanks.
Applauding Father's Month here. Tell us about Music for Everyone, and also this 4 pillars of your organization.
Sure. So Music for Everyone exists to cultivate the power of music as an educational, community building, social justice, and well-being tool. And we do this in lots of different ways. Probably on the community building side of things, we have probably our most visible program, which is our Keys for the City program. If you're from Lancaster or visit Lancaster in the summer months, you've probably seen the pianos downtown. We're the piano people. And we place anywhere from 12 to 20 pianos on the streets of Lancaster that anybody can play 24/7, in an idea of bringing people together around music, but also creating access to music and musical instruments. In addition to that, we have a community chorus that anyone and everybody can come sing for the sheer joy of singing. We have a ukulele uprising.
Before we go to the community chorus, go back a square and talk about your relationship of not only the placement of the pianos, but your relationship with visual artists.
Sure. So everything that we do when we engage with, so we let me back up a little bit. So we have sponsors who come in and will sponsor pianos, which is a direct fundraiser for our instrument grant program. To date, we've provided about 13,000 instruments through that grant program, and a big portion of the funds we raised came from the Keys for the City pianos. But we also, for each piano that we place on the street, we engage a local artist or school to come in, design those pianos. And Music for Everyone is really, really intentional about anytime we engage a creative person, paying them something. We wish we could always pay our artists a lot more than we do, but too often a lot of our artists are put in the position of being paid in exposure or asked to volunteer when they probably shouldn't be volunteering their services.
Well, a couple exposure, we're exposed now. Now we need to be paid. So,
exactly.
So the notion of paying artists, I think everybody knows. I am committed to that. You pay them something as an acknowledgement, but and you can hear mothers sitting with their little kids playing chopsticks, and you can hear old men playing Rachmaninoff's, concerto in C, in the middle of the bus station, in the middle of the train station, in a Latino parking lot. It's an incredible access to music. My mother's first tune that she ever taught me was "All things shall perish from under the sky. Music alone shall live, never to die." So the notion of hearing music, which we only hear in electronic places, is great. But we also, good brother, the only place we sing is in church and in the showers. And you started this community choir. Would you talk about that?
Yeah, and not to, just to back up to Keys for the City, those tens of thousands of magical musical moments that happen during the course of the summer are just, they're breathtaking. I've run into people, and I've had people reach out to me and just tell us about the impact of the Keys for the City music or Keys for the City pianos on their lives. And one story that really speaks out to me was I ran into a woman. I was doing we go around and document the pianos, and you end up in a lot of conversations. And this woman was playing, and I asked her, "Hey, can I take a picture?" And we started talking. She was saying, I've been going through one of the most difficult things ever in my life right now. And I come out to the piano every day, play for about 15, 20 minutes, and it's the only thing keeping me grounded. And, you know, thank you so much. And I've heard so many stories like that. And that's what the pianos are all about, is that access to music, go out, play, be a part of your community, and have a lot of fun while you do it, or have some catharsis while you're doing it.
Yeah.
That feeds into the community chorus as well. A lot of our folks come to sing for the sheer joy of singing. And we started with 8 members, and then pre-COVID we had about 100. And now we're working on developing a position for the director of community singing, that in addition to the chorus would go around and strengthen choral programs throughout Lancaster County.
This notion of choral singing, I was at the Irish Arts Center in residence for the Silk Road Project. And we're talking about work songs and play songs, but especially the people sang all the time. They sang when they were working, they sang when they were resting, they sang when they were cradling their children. And now, with the exception of karaoke, which would require another conversation, about competition, the notion of singing together, what have you discovered through the community choir that changes folks with the notion of singing together?
You know, first and foremost, it's an access point to music that more or less anybody can engage in. You know, there's no instrument that you have to purchase. There's no, you can just go out and sing. And but from the community building side of things, when you're singing with folks and you bring people together, it's magical, for lack of a better term. And the community chorus is a great testament to that. Again, we started with 8 folks who came together and said, hey, MFE, we want to just put together something where everybody can come sing. No auditions, no anything, just people who want to sing and enjoy music. And their ranks really quickly grew to about 100 folks. And that really speaks to the power of how music, and especially choral singing, can build that community.
Now, if we had a fire drill and we had to shout over my left shoulder, how do people get in touch with you about coming and joining the chorus? What would that connection be?
Visit our website, any and all things MFE, go to musicforeveryone.org, or on all social medias, we're at MFE Lancaster. You can always find connection points to us through that. You can also email us at info@musicforeveryone.org to start a conversation directly.
So Brendan, I was washing my dishes in my kitchen, heard all this great brass band music, looked out the window, and here comes this flatbed truck with a brass band on it. Talk about your floating bands that cross the city.
Yeah, so when COVID hit, we had to get pretty creative. You know, so many of our programs, from Music Fridays to the Community Chorus to Keys for the City, revolve around people and interacting with people or things. And when COVID hit, we kind of said, oh, we probably shouldn't do that, but how can we still build community through music? So in true MFE fashion, we started throwing ideas at the wall. And one thing we came up with was our flatbed trucks, where we strapped musicians down with safety harnesses and went all through the city. And I think it was really a point of light in a time that everybody was incredibly stressed out and super isolated. We still to this day get a lot of calls to bring those back. And we're perhaps maybe in the future we might do that.
We loved throwing up our windows or coming out on our stoops. You know, you knew about when the band was going to roll through your neighborhood. It was the greatest diversity of music, every type of music, and therefore broke down those accessibility lines, you know, because suddenly in a German Oompa neighborhood, you were hearing Jamaican music, or in a Irish two-step neighborhood, you were hearing a great klezmer. It was a wonderful project.
Yeah, and we're really excited because this will be the second year the city has come and the city's always been really supportive of us. But especially as we come out of COVID, we're finding ways to engage our neighborhoods in the city a lot more. And one thing we're doing with our Music Fridays, which is kind of where the trucks originated, is that we are placing musical acts in every single quadrant of the city, so that more folks can get access to the Music Friday environment, which, you know, is free access, free concerts, and a great time. So much of what we do in Lancaster City revolves around the immediate grid of downtown, and we need to break out of that and start doing more in the neighborhoods.
And we're going to talk with Jen in a minute, but if Keisha is still with us, Keisha, would you join just us back a minute?
Yes.
I wanted to ask you a bit about your exhibition of using the instruments to create all these beautiful three-dimensional shapes and pieces. You work on flat surfaces and flat canvas. So what was the discovery about the instruments, and how did the instruments inform the final work?
So the discovery was that I couldn't go in and paint per se, like to start, like the base of these instruments. I couldn't go in and paint the base color of them with like just a paintbrush, because it wouldn't have the coverage that I would hope for, that I would get on a canvas. So at this time I had already done a few murals and kind of experimented with spray paint. So I actually took a lot of these instruments outside and spray painted them in the park to give myself a base layer to work from. And then I added hand painted details to give it my sense of style and touch as an artist.
Some of the pieces are so exceptional. The clarinets, the
That's one of my
violin, some
favorites.
whimsical pieces to. So again, I asked the artist the question of discovery by taking you from first gallery painting to walls, and then from walls to instruments that inform the piece. What do you learn? What have you learned about your own work through this collaboration with Music for Everyone?
That my work can be more versatile than I put myself in the box of being a fine artist, like you said before, and having gallery work. But there's also a type of art that's things like installations, which I feel like this kind of fell under as well. So it's a whole new world and kind of different way for me to explore the different techniques that I can learn from painting on a flat surface and then applying that to something new.
And your piano that you painted for them, what was your
Yes.
concept there?
So I actually got to do two, and then I actually did a mural, which is on the Duke Street parking garage.
Yes.
So it's always great to drive by and see that. And I actually got to keep a few pieces of my piano. The first one that I did, it was underneath Adam's mural that is at Tellus, the Conjuring Giants mural. So the style that I did for that, it was right in my realm as an artist. So I followed his imaging of and painted a strong Black woman on the side of the piano, and had my brown skin girl faces, which is a series that I've been doing pre-pandemic. So that has evolved as well with me as an artist. So I like to put elements of that in all of my work.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a wonderful, I believe that on both of your websites, there are images of the instruments and the pianos, correct?
Yes.
Correct? And this is the marriage of forms, of styles, of purposes, of goals, and the crossing of lines of what defines gallery, what defines theater, what defines performance space. which brings me to another question before we ask Jen to join us. So you have this new program, Brandon, that I'm going to be a client of sooner than I think, and that is sending musicians to seniors' homes to play in their living rooms. And would you talk about that? I think that that's brilliant community work.
Yeah, thank you. For the month of March, we teamed up with Meals on Wheels to celebrate March on Meals and Music in Our Schools Month. And what we did was we paired musicians with Meals on Wheels volunteers. And as the volunteer would drop some food off for some folks, our musicians would go in and play them a song or two. And the idea is really to reach to some of the most isolated folks in our community. A lot of times I do a lot of behind the scenes stuff, more the admin kind of things, but I got to go along with on one of the days that we went. And it was one of the coolest things that we've ever done. And we've done a lot of cool things. It was truly moving. The people who were receiving these songs and these meals were they were speechless. It was truly wonderful. And we're hoping to continue to do a lot more of that. Meals on Wheels was a wonderful partner. We pride ourselves on collaborations. We've collaborated with 60, 70 different nonprofits in the last 17 years. And Meals on Wheels is on the top of my list. They were a great community partner. So we're hoping to bring that back, especially for Make Music Day. So Lancaster is one of the International Make Music Day cities. And we're hoping to bring a level of community service through music, and the Meals on Wheels collaboration being one of those.
The Meals on Wheels collaboration was a too hanky idea. The whole idea of people in isolation, having music come into their homes. It was so enriching, particularly for the homebound who are cut off from the affinity of music, which rhythm can be heard, it can be seen, and it can be felt. So it uses 3 of the 6 senses. I believe sometimes you can taste music too. You can smell a good tune, So it really changed the palette of so many senior citizens who are homebound. And I applaud you all for that idea. And I'd like to bring Jen in to join you in a conversation, because we've used this term community about 6 different ways now. We've talked about the community of artists, the community of art providers, the community of patrons, the funding community, the Pennsylvania Humanities Council embraces and provides the kind of incubator, cradle, and mothership for all these conversations about artists and community. Jen, when I began, you know me very well, It was an artist residency program.
Mm-hmm.
Then it changed from artist residency programs to artist in residency. And in the first Ruby artist residency, you got a grant to go off and make art. It was art for art's sake. But artists in residency began to imply, Mark, that now we were going to place you somewhere where you were going to reside. And therefore, Ashley, if you were residing, it changed to artists in community, and then it changed to artist communities, Now, are we talking about the artists anymore? Or are we talking about the community? Who are we serving? Who is the primary? Well, the needs change from the need for art's sake, which is like a Harlem Renaissance kind of idea, or a 50s Judson Street, versus the WPA Act, where artists are working to build healthier communities. And so I've asked Jen to help us with the elasticity between the arts in Pennsylvania and the humanities in Pennsylvania, which are these two pieces. Welcome, Jen, from the Pennsylvania Humanities Council.
Thanks for having me. And Lenwood, you're ageless. You're not going into any senior homes anytime soon. So.
Well, it's good training in theater, but yes, help us out first, because the Pennsylvania Humanities Council is a different kind of animal. It's not actually a government a state government agency.
That's
Help
right.
us out there.
Yeah. So, and we've recently changed our name. We're now PA Humanities. So and hello, everybody. It's really great to see people in the audience and to hear about some of the other work. Keisha's website is amazing. If you guys get a chance after this, go on there. She's got some really great stuff there. Yeah, so PA Humanities, we used to be PA Humanities Council, but about a year ago, we dropped the council from our name because a lot of people thought they thought we were a state agency. We're actually an independent 501c3, and our kind of mothership, as we say, is the National Endowment for the Humanities. Every state and U.S. territory has a humanities council or a humanities organization like us that does statewide work. So yeah, we're independently funded, although a lot of our funding comes from federal sources, from the NEH, and then we work in collaboration with other funders, but we're not a state agency like, say, the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts is.
And you're not primarily a grant-making agency. And I think that's what people get confused about first and foremost. So.
Yep. And I would say that, a lot of the work that we do is we have been ramping up our grant making since, and we just had a call about this, and someone says, stop calling it grant making. It's really philanthropy, because the root of the word philanthropy is about, I'm going to butcher this, but it's about helping your brother, right? It's really helping out, but the pandemic, we started to give more grants because some of the relief money came through the federal government to arts and culture organizations that really needed, help as the pandemic was raging. But we do have other programs. We do things like
help me out, Jen. Let me take this tango language. Let me take 2 steps forward to make 3 steps. Okay.
Let's do it.
Help us so that we're looking through the same lens and hearing the same thing. How do you define the humanities?
That's a great question. That is another conversation we just had. Yeah. I would say that we are the culture part. When people talk about arts and culture, the humanities really is about helping people understand their life experience and what that means. So a lot of it is about like critical thinking about life experiences. A lot of the times, the way in which that comes out of folks is through an artistic an artistic way. But we're the conversation people, right? It's where we're thinking about, well, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean? What does our history tell us about who we are? And then we always say that art part is the extension of that. That's the creation. You're using some sort of method or model to actually create what you feel about that experience.
And we know that the art part is the part that's left behind. It's the part that we can find in the future. Mark, in the Metropolitan Museum, there is, in the Warriors Hall, where they have all the statues of the Romans and the Greeks, there is a Greek holding a shield. And the shield has a Greek holding a shield. That has a Greek holding a shield, and under it are the words, "Here was an artist." And the artist was not separated out as somebody other. This is my challenge in central Pennsylvania, that we pay taxes, we have children, we have potholes that need to be filled, we have jobs, we need security and safety. But how did we get separated?
Yeah, that's a great, are you asking me to answer that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I would say this is just from my perspective, and it's just my perspective, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. But I think a lot of the times it's really down to funding. It's about that scarcity mentality where everybody's quote, fighting for dollars. I know that in, the nonprofit world, that is a real thing. I mean, Keisha was talking about writing grants, and some of you guys were talking about how, writing grants and how you have to like fashion the story in order to make it seem like something someone would want to invest in, which is just such a crazy concept. But I honestly think, Lenwood, that a lot of it is about funding. I don't really think at PA Humanities, we see the arts and humanities as working together. I mean, it's really complementary to, you can't have an artist who doesn't consider their own history. That's how they make pieces, right? Like whether you're a singer, a dancer, a writer, a painter, you are considering your own experience or something that is happening in history. Again, talking about the George Floyd mural and some of the, the other things that Keisha was talking about earlier, and even Brendan talking about, the fact that music is about an extension of yourself. That is the humanities, is considering that stuff and creating something as a part, as in response to that. So my feeling is that there is no separation, but I think academically, I'll say that also, you have your art group, you got your art center at universities, and you got your humanities center. And I think it really comes down to money. Honestly, I think it comes down to money.
And structurally, we come out of our institutions with that division.
Yep.
So how do you define community, since you're working with such diverse communities and your organization always uses the impact of a program on its communities? Where do we add community as we're baking up this loaf of bread?
Yeah. I mean, I think community defines themselves. They already know who they are. And I think that's been a huge transition for us. The humanities have been, I mean, the word humanities is so clunky, right? And it's a very academic sounding, it's very opaque. People don't always understand, like art, you get it, right? Humanities is always like this kind of opaque thing. And I'll say that one of our learning journey as an organization has been not to be top down in communities and come to communities with, you should be reading these types of books, you should be talking about this kind of history, but to flip that and say, what is the history, or the community is the expert on their own history, right? So how do we bring more of that to the forefront, as opposed to coming in with, classics, and all that stuff is important. But so that's defining community is really about us enabling them through our programs and our grants to actually tell their own story. So I wouldn't say that I have a neat definition of what community is, but I think the way in which we think of community and how they can interact with the humanities has changed a lot over the past couple of years.
And how do these events, cultural, historical, impact the dividing lines between communities?
Yeah, I mean, no secret that there are a lot of political things happening in the world, right? And trying to figure out, what the humanities role and the arts role is in bringing people together across divides, or allowing people to have those conversations that are about, difference and, maybe political differences, I think is really something that we're trying to invest in. Communities care, even thinking about Brendan, the way he described his organization, they're a social justice organization just as much as they're a music organization, same thing with Keisha's, creations. I mean, it isn't just about the artist or the organization anymore. It's really about responding to what's happening in the world and making people feel like they're a part of that, right? That they show up, that there's representation. So I don't know if I have a neat answer on how to bridge divides, but I think that
that's good. And that's a good transition point about being a part of it. You have some programs coming up this weekend and throughout the month that are going to open doors and windows and allow people to think of the humanities not in stuffy ways or in marble boxes, but as part of the texture of their own lives. You talk about
Yeah, we have a couple of programs. We have something coming up next week that's called Rain Poetry, where we're working with communities in Philadelphia. Our first one, I think, is going to be in West Philadelphia, where we work with poets to teach young people how to do haiku. And the topic around the haikus is, what do you want to grow or bloom? You know, the idea is spring, you know, and then it's rain poetry. So we're actually going into a community in North Philly into a park, I'm sorry, West Philly into a park, and you stencil whatever so the kids write the poems, they're taught how to do poetry, and then they create a stencil of that poem, put it on the ground, and then if you apply water to it, water. My Philly's
That's
coming
all
out.
right. Lancaster and Lancaster. Yeah.
But once you apply water to it, the poems bloom, like they show up. It's a special kind of paint. So it's a really cool community event where young people at a local school in West Philly, again, were taught by poets, and now they're going to actually premiere the poems out in a park, and they have like a splash pad, and really amazing community event. And the kids, you know, again, created those poems. They were asked prompts about, like, what do you want to grow? What has been meaningful to you in your, you know, in your young life? And, you know, that's how they're creating these haikus. So that's just one example of one of the community programs we're doing.
And you've been deconstructing and reconstructing the whole way your organization works. Would you talk about that? We have several board members of the library who are going through that same process of rethinking the relationship of the institution to the cultural grounding of the current situation. Let's talk about that whole process.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that, I guess about 5 years ago, we really started to think about, like I said earlier, our relation to community and kind of that top-down nature of some of the programs that maybe we were, you know, how we were thinking about the humanities in a more top-down way. And so we did a lot of soul searching, tried to change. We're in communities more. We have a program called Chester Made that was really about working with the community of Chester to kind of define, and a lot of arts in that program too, a really intersection between arts and humanities. And then more recently, we're actually doing a research project, which Lenwood was a part of. It was really great. We're actually getting out, and we did some virtual and some in person, where we're going out and we're talking to people that make art, that do the humanities, that do community work, and asking them, how do we rethink the humanities? Like, what does the humanities even mean anything to you? And we're hearing, surprise, surprise, humanities and the way people live their lives and how they're responding to that is a part of everybody, right? And just, you know, sometimes the way in which we define that and put that out there can be, can separate people from that, right? But how do we be more open and more community oriented? So we did a series of focus groups. We talked to Black artists in Philadelphia and asked them about their work and what it meant. We talked to, Lenwood was a part of what we call the traditional statewide groups. Those folks that have been in the history space, art space for a while and are doing work with museums and libraries. We talked to young people, 18 to 24. What does it mean? And that was fascinating to see what they think the humanities is. And they talked a lot about social justice, a lot of that stuff. So yeah, it's been a really amazing process, and we're going to come up with the research is still happening now. And I think that'll redefine even further some of the programming that we're doing.
Let me ask you two things, and we'll invite our friend Kim Chan to join the conversation. What makes you get up in the day and take this on?
That's a great question. We asked that a lot during the pandemic, and I don't know if people were ready for it. I think it was probably too early to ask that, but the people part of it, what I just talked about, those focus groups and going, Lenwood was a part of one that was virtual, which I think, you know, you lose a little bit when you're not in person, although we were still able to connect with people, which was really great. But the ones we did in person, just listening to people talk about how meaningful the work is that they do and how it is a part of their DNA. I mean, we had so many people talk about how the arts and humanities, whether it's history, it's drawing, it's literature, writing, was a part of who they were. And they were trying to document not only for themselves, but past, you know, ancestors and future folks. And I think that's giving me chills right now, just being able to enable that. And being able to be a part of that and bring people together. I like to convene people. I want to be able to give grants and support that work in a more trust-based way. And that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, that's what gets me up in the morning. And I also am a writer myself. I used to write short stories, and just that expression part of it and really kind of thinking through like what experience means that's something that jazzes me. I like that.
We will come back in the Q&A and ask some more questions about that. Please go to the Pennsylvania Council on Humanities website. There are some programs that I'll ask Jen to talk about a little later for individuals for the first time. Don't all have to be 501c3. You know, we don't have to build what I refer to as the 501c3 ghetto. You know, the proliferation of nonprofit organizations, you know, that implode the. But you said two things that are really a great way of me introducing my colleague and friend Kim Chan. The one was enabling, and the other was convening. And when I went to the National Endowment for the Arts as a program director, I was called into the deputy's office, and he said two important things to me. The first was, your budget is your program. No matter what you say, no matter how much hyperbole and goodwill and all that, you look at where you are in the budget. You know, and I used to say from that point on in my program, we need to turn this upside down, because all the stuff we talk about doing is at the bottom of the budget. Yeah, the first to be cut, you know. So that advocacy work, and that was a really good lesson for me. The other thing he said is, you came here and you will leave here with two tools: the power to enable and the power to convene. And I have been lucky in all of my years, as I did that dance back and forth across the line from being an administrator to be an artist, to encounter Kim Chan at each of the junctions of that dance as we change places. I've sat in rooms with Kim Chan and argued about, you know, the Piss Christ, for example, or which was a piece of art that was created to reflect on artifacts in urine, you know, but we had to go to Congress once to convince the Chicago senator to support something called Corn for Porn, in which the Eastern supporters of the arts endowment would trade with the Western farm state senators of grazing cows on federal land in exchange for supporting the arts. We've looked out onto Pennsylvania Avenue during the crises of AIDS and seen young men and women lay down in the street, you know, and stop their bodies and protest. And we've seen art build, form, explode, and start new movements. So a champion and advocate for the arts has always been Kim Chan, and it's just a great pleasure to introduce you to Kim this evening. Hello, my friend, hello.
Hey, so thank you for that. And I must have felt you thinking of those moments in our lives, because I did prepare some slides, and I did choose to start with this slide from the era in which we met.
And I'm going to sit down and let the two of you.
Okay. So I hope everyone can see this. This is a photo of the DC production of Coco Fusco and Guillermo Gomez Peña's Guatanawi World Tour of two undiscovered Amerindians touring the Americas. It's a project which I produced with my colleagues in this photo at the Smithsonian's Museum of Natural History and which the Smithsonian tried to cancel because it was a little scary, as I was driving to the airport to pick the artist up. So that is quite an arts advocacy story. I am, as Lenny said, an arts worker with a long-term commitment to working with independent artists, both through my work with arts nonprofits and also as an independent producer and organizer. I am currently based here on the unceded territory of the Lenape, also called New York City, where I was born and raised as a fifth-generation Chinese American whose ancestral villages are the Lower East Side and the Mississippi Delta. In one of my roles in the field today, I am the senior director at National Sawdust, a music incubator and performance space in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, named for the original purpose of the building where we are based. Co-founded by our artistic director, the composer Paola Prestini, and our board chair, Kevin Dolan, National Sawdust is one of the last remaining cultural assets in an iconic neighborhood where dozens of independent music venues responsible for reinvigorating a depressed industrial area have closed because of the gentrification that followed the creative vanguard to Williamsburg. And here is a video that tells our story through the artist experience.
And National Sawdust is this very special place. It's like a silence and chaos. And when I come here, the noise is gone, and I start to be able to see the essence of my own thought.
The work here is really intimate, and you get a chance to really feel the artist and the work.
And it takes me away from what can be so trivial and so distracting, and it makes me realize that that's why we're living. And I think that doing that with a community and with intimacy the way Sawdust can do is really valuable.
Sawdust gives space, time, and resources for projects that may not otherwise find a home.
Venues have been turning away hip hop. And so for me to have a space to come to and say, hey, I want to rap my head off and really say something means a lot.
My residency in December, I can't think of another place in town that would have supported that in the way that that project was supported. It was a total blissful joy being here.
One thing that was really cool about that residency for me, and so this was a moment that allowed for a real cool overlap and fusion of people from LA and New York to come together and have a weekend of really rich programming.
What was shocking to me is that they asked me to do something, whatever I wanted to do. And so when we did Orphic Moments, it had a kind of energy, and in the room there was a feeling of something new. Having the support system here at Sawdust of people who are open to these kinds of ideas, who can help you realize them, who can guide you but also not limit you.
This type of thing happens very infrequently.
Because we're creating the new models in a world that needs some new models right now.
We do it because I think we're looking for this connection.
That's where I feel at home. These people who are interested in not just looking back and exploring the tradition, but sort of using that as a springboard to push this whole art form into the future.
It's our opportunity to discover new and younger voices.
And Sawdust has really given me experience and skills that I can apply all throughout the creative industry.
And National Sawdust really makes me feel like this is what I'm supposed to do, and I won't stop because of that.
So in addition to my work at National Sawdust, I am a board member at 4 different organizations also dedicated to fostering artists' creativity and their ability to build communities with audiences. So these organizations are, the MAP Fund, which since 1988 has brought more than $35 million and a national spotlight to artists working outside the traditional Western artistic canon, and who are therefore less likely to be included in traditional funding mechanisms available to support artists' work. Our efforts have centered on examining how philanthropy and potential changes to funding systems can impact the overall performance ecology. It is the longest running private funding partner to performing artists working in non-commercial, disruptive, and often marginalized practices. The Mid-Atlantic Arts was established in 1979 to promote and support multi-state arts programming in a region that includes Delaware, the District of Columbia, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, the US Virgin Islands, Virginia, West Virginia, and most recently we've added Puerto Rico. The Pickup Performance Company is a producing and presenting organization founded by the choreographer-director David Gordon in 1978, which expanded as a family business in 1992 to also support the work of David's son, Ain Gordon. Ain is a 3-time Obie Award-winning writer, director, and actor, a 2-time New York Foundation for the Arts recipient, a Creative Capital Fellow, and a Guggenheim Fellow whose work frequently sources marginalized history and the nearly obscured lives inhabiting that space. Ping Chong and Company was founded in New York City in 1975 by the leading theatrical innovator Ping Chong. Today, the company is a highly adaptive and supportive home base for multi-generational, interdisciplinary artists of color with generative theater practices. This image was used on Instagram for the New York City Arts Workers Rally in 2021, which happened just around the time we were all starting to be vaccinated. The rally existed to raise visibility for arts workers to be included in policy and funding decisions about how to survive and emerge from the lockdown. The lockdown, I feel, brought increased awareness of the labor that artists and arts workers contribute to our sector. And now that performances and touring are back, I lost my place. I think time will tell if we as a field can make the policy and funding changes we need to rebuild to a better place. Artists also need not just their creative and rehearsal time, but they need managerial, producing, and administrative infrastructure for their work to be made. Because every dance performance, every play or musical in a theater, every band you want to hear, every public art installation, every piece of art in a museum is there because artists collaborated with a team of designers, managers, cultural producers, and workers like myself to bring an artistic vision to life. As civic and as arts leaders, we are chronically under-recognized and under-resourced, despite the fact that we provide vital leadership and infrastructure that make our field thrive. At the MAP Fund, 2022 brought the largest pool of applicants in our history, close to 1,500 applications, and $2.6 million went to more than 300 live performance artists across 88 projects. MAP Fund hybridized and democratized the selection process using both peer review, evaluation, which is the traditional way, but also randomized selection in the final cohort of grantees. 88% of the applicants were individual artists seeking support for their work, whereas only 7% of the applications came from producing or presenting organizations. And 86% of the funded projects are led by artists of color. Mid-Atlantic Arts has several programs where it provides fee and travel subsidies to artists and presenters working in our region. Each program provides support in different ways, including subsidies for performances regionally, nationally, and internationally, developing tours, and to communities who then determine the best program fit for their region. Subsidies like the ones provided by Mid-Atlantic and other groups influence how gigs are prioritized in nonprofit presenters' schedules. There is also an entire part of the performing arts ecosystem that operates outside of this system, which artists need to know how to advocate. So my advice to artists about today's gig economy is to figure out which part of the ecosystem works best for your work and to then go from there. The choreographer Miguel Gutierrez's 2021 podcast series, Are You for Sale?, is an astute assessment of the state of financial affairs facing independent artists for decades. It empowers its listeners with knowledge, context, and ideas about the policies and practices we are working within and poses possibilities for thinking about how we can move beyond these systems. 2 decades before Miguel started making art in New York City, experimental postmodern artists like Ping Chong and David Gordon were able to create managerial and producing infrastructure for themselves in the 1970s because there were government and private funding opportunities created to serve a new nonprofit cultural sector. But as the number of arts nonprofits has grown over time, the number of funding opportunities has decreased, and with it, the financial incentives for artists and managers to make the nonprofit system work for them. Companies like Ping Chong Company and Pickup Performance Company are now exploring options for how their infrastructures can be repurposed for incoming generations. At Ping Chong Company, as the board prepared for Ping and his longtime executive director, Bruce Allardyce, to retire, we decided to transition to a collective leadership model. And here is a video about our transition.
I'm excited to make avenues of experimentation for the next generation of artists. I'm honored to build on the 50-year legacy of Ping Chong and Bruce Allardyce to collaborate and curiously reimagine. I hope there will be lots of laughter.
In deciding to move forward Ping Chong Company past its founder and longtime executive director, the process has raised a lot of big existential questions, primarily this big why. And I think it's really important to keep coming back to this question throughout the process of the transition and to always center the artist in this process and uphold values of criticality, artistry, social justice, and integrity. We move forward with a great deal of deep gratitude to Bruce and Ping for all of the gifts that they are leaving with us.
Ping Chong & Company has been my home for over 20 years, where I've been mentored by Ping and Bruce, and I'm excited for the future where we create a holistic home for artists making new interdisciplinary works and deepening our community engagement programs across the country.
I want to avoid all of the hype and hyperbole and big dreams about the future. Art is always about dreaming forward, manifesting the impossible. I'm excited about being a part of a new generative think tank, a process of collective collaboration inspired by the 50-year history of Ping Chong and Company.
So I want to also, as part of my comments tonight, to encourage and implore all of you to read this book, Voices from the Battlefront. My sense is that incoming generations may not know about the artists and the arts workers on whose shoulders we stand and who kick the doors open for us, because the systems that are set up are set up to keep us from gaining this knowledge. And to move forward, it is really essential for all of us to know about the artists and the arts workers who laid the foundation for how people of the global majority can have agency within the cultural sector, and how they have done this for decades, long before DEI became a vogue for brands everywhere. And within that, I would say that more than ever, mentorship is essential. And that takes me back to our work at National Sawdust, where our mentorship programs are designed to support and nurture artists who have been historically excluded and underrepresented in the cultural sector. So here is a video of the composer Jihye Lee talking about the impact of her Toulmin Fellowship with National Sawdust and the Center for Ballet and the Arts at NYU, to give you a sense of the impact of our mentorship programs.
I'm Jihye Lee. I'm a jazz composer, mostly writing for large ensemble. This fellowship actually made me jump out of my comfort zone, which is my jazz world. And then I got to interact with some modern dancers or some singer-songwriters and some artists that doing what I don't. And then it's been so much inspiration. And I think it kind of expands my perspective. Dancers always need sound, but composers, it's such a rare opportunity to collaborate with dancers. So I think to have visual inspiration, it actually affects on my music. And I'm a composer who likes to shift the imagery of or story, anything, to the sonical equivalent. I'm Jihye Lee.
So at the MAP Fund, we have a program called Scaffolding for Practicing Artists, or SPA, which is also a mentorship program. It takes an artist-centered approach that honors the sacredness of process in an often product-driven creative sector, both nonprofit and for-profit. Scaffolding for Practicing Artists is offered to a subset of MAP grantees and Jerome Hill Artist Fellows. It is designed to increase artists' feelings of agency in their artistic careers and to build a deeper sense of community and belonging among the peers and mentors. The program is grounded in the values of curiosity, humility, intuition, compassion, shared responsibility, ease, and analysis of structural oppression. So back to National Sawdust, I want to say that it is completely thrilling for me to be part of this newest chapter of artist-run and artist-founded organizations in the US. Our work at National Sawdust stands on the legacy of artist-run organizations and cultural entrepreneurs, which can be traced back at least as far as the work of cellist Charlotte Moorman and her role establishing New York's first new music festivals, her commitment to interdisciplinary collaboration, and her participation in Fluxus in the 1960s. By the 1980s, artist-run organizations with renegade artistic and civic visions reached a critical mass in the US. These organizations influenced the country's cultural sector by exerting an outsized influence in comparison with the larger nonprofit institutions around which the cultural sector had been established. The service organization, National Association of Artists Organizations, or NAO, which ran from 1982 through 2001, provided significant leadership in shaping the national dialogue on policy and leadership in the arts for independent artists, such as those who are national Sawdust constituents. NAO also led the charge for the arts in the 1990s culture wars by mobilizing rapid responses among community-based and artist spaces to the congressional attacks against independent artists and free expression, which Lenny has already referred to. These attacks led to other incidents of art censorship across the country, including a decency clause authored by Senator Jesse Helms, written into grant guidelines at the grant contracts at the National Endowment for the Arts, and the cancellation of the NEA grants to independent artists. To understand more fully and how the 1990s culture wars established the economy for independent artists today, I again highly recommend that you listen to Miguel's podcast, Are You for Sale? In particular, episode 4, which talks about the culture wars. And as you listen, I ask you to consider the many book bans going on in our country right now and how we can collectively continue to fight back in the way that NAO led us in the 90s. So thank you.
Kim, just a wonderful presentation, of course. Let me start by thanking you on behalf of all the communities that we belong to, because cultural vocabulary and cultural memory are really, we are being siloed again. And one of the exciting things about that time that we were coming up is we were about gathering, we were about organizing, we were about conferencing, we were affirmation, acclamation, and solidarity were really important elements of our breathing and our confusion. You brought up this whole thing about legislation and the importance of us keeping our eyes and ears on the subtlety of words that creep into our contracts, our agreements, our authority. What do you see as we approach another national election year in 24? The work ahead of us as arts advocates and artivists?
Well, I see a lot of my free time writing postcards to voters, phone banking, doing things completely outside my comfort zone because it's not in my art bubble. And I did a lot of that during the lockdown, and it just kind of instilled in me a practice of understanding that we exist in our communities across these continuums of organizing, or at least for me, I'm an organizer, and these things are interconnected and intersectional. And what I learned, from working with brilliant minds like Charlotte Murphy and Roberto Bedoya and James Luna and Baraka Saleh, is that you always have your eyes on the whole landscape, and you figure out where, with the time that you have, you can most strategically impact what that landscape is. And so, for example, a lot of my time during the lockdown was actually spent around advocacy issues about the anti-Asian hate, right? Which when I was growing up and my father was beating this into me, like I needed to be aware of these things, I was like not interested, right? And then I spent a fair amount of my free time organizing for Asian American studies to become mandated in the curriculums of the public schools in New Jersey, where I have a house. And we, with a group of people who had never met before, we were only meeting by Zoom, and we're not always, organizers. And we became the second state in the country to mandate this kind of curriculum. So I think that what I learned from that is sometimes I need to do my work through the arts. And sometimes I need to do my work by phone banking for political candidates.
Now, this is really important about arts advocacy, because we tend to only do that when we are in the most disruptive or threatened state. I mean, it is not part of our daily breathing. And could you comment on the rhythm of advocacy that needs to be sustained in order to
Well, I think the way in which I see the field has responded to some of these rhythms is, and maybe what's different about advocacy today than back in the 90s, is that there is a heightened awareness and understanding of how burnout is not good for any kind of advocacy. So what is the care that you are going to invest for yourself and your colleagues in order to advocate for what is needed? And I find that really refreshing and completely energizing. I was talking to a friend about this over the weekend, and one of the things she pointed out to me is that in the social change, social justice sector, one of the outcomes of the pandemic is that nonprofit staffs are more and more starting to unionize.
Nonprofit staff unionizing. That's a conversation.
Right. And one of the nonprofits that's unionizing is my former employer, PEN America, which is a free expression organization for literature. And I was like, when I was working there, I was working kind of insane hours, 4 or 5 months out of the year. And I read an article in the New York Times about this thing in Japan. They have a name for it. I don't remember the name for it, but basically the concept is death by overwork. And there was an article about people who were dying from overwork. And as I was reading the article, the only thought that occurred to me is like, those people who are dying from overwork actually had better hours than I am working. So am I killing myself, and is this job worth it?
Well, now, that death of overwork is a very important thing. You read an incredible roll call when you add Baraka Saleh and all the kinds of names that we talk about here. Ping Chong retiring makes me ask the question about founders syndrome and founders who are tired, at the passing on. It connects to the concept of mentoring, but also the blueprint for continuity being built at the same time that the work is being built. And I know we are, I dare say, aging out. The number of founders are dealing with this notion of when to let go, how to pass.
With Ping, he was like, I'm ready. He would have left 2 years earlier, but we were like, we need a strategic planning process. We need to think this through. Can you please help us think this through, right? Or give us the time. And so he is one of those artists who he has said, and at his retirement party, Mia, you quoted him as saying that he's a 20th century man, and he really isn't interested in moving forward in the 21st century as an artist. He's with a company. He's more than happy to work as an independent artist, but he doesn't want the pressures of running of being the artistic director. So he's going to continue to make work, but he's stepping away from the company.
This is an important point in each of our lives and our personal narrative arcs. I wanted to ask all four of our guests to come back and reference this, because Brendan is part of an organization that has an extremely dynamic founder, and ask, what is the plan besides us tapping into John Gertie's central nervous system and charging ourselves? What is the plan for passage of founder in your organization?
We've been preparing internally for that transition in power, making sure that from a governance standpoint, we are prepared for that. And, in short, we're going to do more of the same and keep pushing the envelope, in all four of our pillars of what we do. Not sure exactly who that will be yet, but Music for Everyone, the work that we do, is very important, as it's everybody's role in the arts on this call. And it's really important that Music for Everyone does not go away anytime soon. So we plan to, again, keep doing more of the same, and we'll make sure that the person, though they have big shoes to fill with John Gertie, will certainly be able to do so.
And Jen, I'd like to ask you, this series, Kim, was started by the dynamic Joseph Kelly, who was the executive director of the Pennsylvania Humanities Council. He and I began the Live and Learn series in 2008. Yes. So you experienced this dynamic of a kind of founder or mentor or griot of your field, and having to move beyond single personality driven, which is not and into an institutional model. What was the ground like as you moved in?
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough transition, right? You have someone who's in place for a while, and they're no longer, at the helm. So we went through a lot of growing pains. So it's not an easy transition, and I'm sure, Kim could probably attest to that as well. Even if someone's ready to move on, it's still like one of those things like, oh, we have to get all of our ducks in a row. One thing I also wanted to add too is that I mentioned that we are doing those focus groups with all of the humanities and arts and culture folks across the state. One of the number one things they said they're worried about is transition, and that turnover is huge in our arts and culture spaces. And I think it's because what Kim mentioned that burnout is real, and people are tired of having to do all the work that they're doing, plus also prove to funders that what they're doing is worth it. And the world sometimes signals to us that, some of this work is touchy-feely and not as worth it. So, we heard that loud and clear, but yet we did a focus group with 18 to 24-year-olds that are ready to go, but the structures in which we have created are foreign to them. They're like, we don't understand this organizational, we get it, but why can't we move beyond that? So I did just want to mention that it's something that we've heard a lot about in Pennsylvania, that this is a big concern, that the next generation of folks may not be stepping up or maybe quitting because they are like, we're just done. We can't do this anymore. We need to care. Self-care is very important,
Really important. Kim talked about mentoring Keisha as a very important part. You're in a place where you've entered some mentoring relationships. What is the importance of a mentor to your impact, and what is the challenge of working in that relationship?
I am starting to have mentors. I work with Evita Cologne with her creative agency. And it's one of the first times I had a mentor professionally, because I pay her for the work that she does for me. But it's really great to have those people who have been places that you haven't, that you can reach out and have that information at hand when you need it. Being a self-taught artist and not really having an education, I didn't know where I could get these resources from. And there's always a gap in that information that I'm still realizing now working for myself. So I'd really take mentorship seriously. And I had also received a mentor who I had my first meeting with through the Black Artist Way Station at the YWCA.
So I'd like to ask you each, if we were to refashion Mount Rushmore, you know, who would you put up there? You as a icon, as a symbol, as a beacon, as a Delphic oracle, as a northern star. Who would you put up there on our arts and humanities? Jen?
It's a couple people going through my mind, but that's a hard question, Lenwood. I don't know. I needed to think about that. I would say that there's a couple of Pennsylvania people that I think about. I'm a horror movie lover, so I really love of course I can't think of it now, but Octavia Butler is also really good. We've been talking a lot about her and the idea of emergent strategy and emergent learning. Give me a second. I have to think about that because that's a huge.
I'll give you a couple more. You know, and we don't only have to put 4 up. That was just the structure of Keisha. You're entering this whole universe of mentoring. Who are your visionaries? Who are you drawn to? Who magnetizes your soul?
In the community or in general?
In general.
In general, a lot of artists, a lot of Black artists who I follow, and as well as my mentor, a few of my mentors, I'm always looking up to people who are in a different part of their career that I strive to be in, and I'm always looking of ways to learn from them. But it's hard to pinpoint a person, and I feel like very very sensitive about pushing stuff on people, because as Kim and Jen were saying about burnout is real. I'm learning that after doing this work over the last 3 years, that self-care is really important for the people who are doing the work in the community. And I really see what it takes and how taxing this work can be at times.
Okay. Young sister, you're brilliant. Don't say you're uneducated. You know, say you're self-schooled. Okay.
Yes.
You know, because you have a greater Catholicity of taste. Just learn that word on the game show.
I'm going to look that up.
You know, you have a greater Catholicity of taste, and you are self-schooled. Brendan, who would you put up there? Who would be your icon or your?
This is definitely a really tough question you're asking here, I think, because there are so many people. You know, I think that if we're talking about building a monument, building something that is going to be a piece of public art and also inspire folks, I don't know that I could pick one person, but I think it would be something that kind of speaks to the sense of community and how powerful community can be, especially when you rally artists and musicians and the people who tend to push social change and tend to push our conversations forward. It'd be some kind of monument to that. What that would be, I don't know. What face?
Let me ask you. I'm going to push you, but from your visionaries, who is a fire starter for you, or who lights up your world right now?
I'm a little on the spot with it, but I'll tell you what, John Gertie, our founder and executive director, and Deb Rohr, our development officer, they have been amazing mentors to me, and they have challenged me to think totally differently than when I started with Music for Everyone 10 years ago. And really, I learned something from them every single day I've worked with, and also all the artists we've worked with in the last 3-4 years. Folks like Keisha, Finnie, Adam Serrano, have just changed my whole perspective on how powerful community can be and how powerful art and music can be.
And our heroes and sheroes come from inside. You know, they don't ascend and descend. They come from. Kim, who would in that universe whose light helps you see in the dark times?
So artist or artists organize or organizers or both?
In the universe of creation.
Okay, so just to show my age, I would look at, I would start with the Bad Brains. Because when I was in high school and the first time I walked in to a Bad Brain show, that reorganized my DNA. And it is still the music that I return to calm myself down. Even though I know for some people it's not, it's a little too fast and a little too loud, that is my happy place. Another one of my happy places in terms of music that I listen to that helps me heal, I would turn to a traditional Hawaiian practitioner like Vicky Holt Takamene and her work. I would say that the first time I ever saw Michelle Parkerson and Essex Hemphill read in DC, that rearranged my DNA in the same way of the Bad Brains. My favorite photographer is the photographer Seng Kwang Chi, who many people may not know because he was part of that early generation of artists who died at the beginning of the AIDS pandemic. But his photography, particularly the series East Meets West, where he's dressed in a Mao suit, with mirrored sunglasses on, wearing credentials like diplomatic laminates that say "slut for art," the ambiguous ambassador, his series visiting Norman Rockwell's house, Disneyland, crashing the Metropolitan Museum gala, like that blew my mind when I first found out about him, which I found about him through Ping's work. But he also came from the whole club circuit in New York that was part of my high school life. So I would put Seng Kwang Chi there, and Ellen Stewart from La Mama, and the entire ensemble also of Sweet Honey in the Rock.
Amen, amen.
Because you know, they wrote the book on, you know, in their work, there is no distinction between community activism, leadership. And another artist who I think is very much underappreciated, and I find that is completely sinful that he is so underappreciated and underknown, is Sekou Sundiata.
Brilliant list, brilliant,
So,
brilliant list. I would
really long.
add to folks, Ruth Azawa, who is a name that many of us don't know. Ruth Azawa is known as a weaver and a sculptor of incredible baskets, huge, 10-foot, 12-foot, 15-foot baskets in all kinds of traditions. But she learned weaving because she and her family were in the Japanese concentration camps in San Francisco. And her mother, Keisha, would take their garments and cut little squares out of them and boil them in vinegar and water. And then they would take the reeds and the reeds around the yard and dye them and weave them through the cyclone fences that surrounded the encampment. We don't talk about Japanese, encampments, but the life there was as difficult as you can imagine. But they took ordinary things and made extraordinary, beautiful landscapes. And I had the opportunity to be her studio assistant at one point, and she said to me that poverty was not your destination. It was a point on the map, but if you had poverty of spirit, you were stuck there. And that her mother taught her how to use these squares, extract the color, add them to the weeds, dry them, weave them into these things. And now when you look in museums across the country at her baskets, which you think are contemporary art pieces, they're really traditional pieces built from the pane. And the other, Jen, would be Mary Carol Richards, who wrote the book Centering. Mary Carol is a potter, MC Richards, you may know, and she uses the concept, Brendan, of centering a pot on the whole thing about centering your life. It was at a time where I was caught up in the angst of my art in New York, and reading her book about centering helped me in the launch of my. Every one of us listening should do this exercise. It may be some iconic person. It may be some person who taught you how to mix paints. Another one, Mark, for me is my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Gray, because she would take a pint, Kim. She put us in a circle. She'd take a pint of heavy cream and she'd put on music, and you would just shake the jar to the music. And she took us through Dizzy Gillespie, and she took us through Rachmaninoff, and she took us through Duke Ellington, and she took us through Debussy. But by the time the jar got around to the last person, it was butter. And we ate it on our crackers. And, we had made something that we could eat. We could eat the art, and her creativity has been a guiding force. That, you can make butter with good music and a pint of heavy cream. So last circle, if you'd like to ask each you ask the other a question or make a comment or a reflection on their presentation, their thoughts. And Brendan, if you'd like to ask Kim, Jen, or Keisha a question, make a comment or a reflection on their presentation.
This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm honored to be speaking with you all, and thank you for all your work. I don't really have any questions. Everybody was incredibly thorough, but this has been certainly the highlight of my week, and it's been a wonderful discussion.
Well, we thank you very much. And the dynamics of people asking, when are the pianos coming? When are the pianos? So when are the pianos coming?
Pianos will be hitting the third week in May. We're placing, I think, 18 this year. So stay tuned, and we got lots of fun stuff happening.
It's worth a trip down the pike to Lancaster to see the piano. Keisha, would you like to ask your colleagues a question, underscore their comment, make a reflection?
Yeah, I don't have any questions right now, but I'm gonna connect with everybody that I do not know. And I'm really thankful that you invited me to this meeting. Yeah, I have really learned a lot from all of you and what you all do and the amazing work that you do. So I'm excited to stay connected and see how we can work together.
And you have a big project that's coming up. Would you?
Yes, I am curating my first event for Lancaster. It's a BIPOC gallery show. I'm curating local artists and performing artists as well who will join me and show beside me for Art Walk.
Thank you very much. Jen?
Sorry, there's an ice cream truck going by in the background, so excuse me. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I mean, I'm out of my depth on this panel. You guys are amazing. I don't know what else to say. I'm going to take away the idea that you can make music and deliver meals to older people and give. I mean, that's amazing.
That is
Keisha, your
amazing.
store, I have it pinned. I'm going to go back and look. And Kim, we're redeveloping our grant program, and some of the stuff that you said about, you know, really making that. So I don't have any questions, but just I might reach out to you because I love the idea of trying to make it more flat, equitable. And I love the idea of having, you know, panel in addition to folks that are doing the practice, really make decisions together. So thank you all. And thank you, Lenwood, for asking me to be a part of this. I really appreciate it.
And Jen, we have dedicated this 15th year again to Joseph Kelly. And we used to always pass out books. Those were in the good old days when we—
Oh my gosh, yes, I ordered them.
We'll give everybody free books at the end of the session. But Kim did mention 2 important books in her presentation. And as I pass to Kim for her closing remarks, I'd also ask if you would just recap what those 2 books were. Okay. Kim, final thoughts, comments, remarks, and the recommendation.
The only book I remember is The Voices from the Battlefront, which was a series of essays edited by Marta Vega and I think it was Cheryl Green.
Yes. Marta Vega said, "Within my race, there are many cultures." That was a very important, you know, quote. It changed my, she said that at a conference in 1988, and it shook us all, you know.
She should be on that Mount Rushmore.
She should be on that Mount Rushmore. Yes, yes.
And then I mentioned the podcast series from Miguel Gutierrez, Are You for Sale? Which
right,
is just
right.
so thoughtful and so informative. And as I was trying to prepare my presentation and looking at all the many questions you sent me, Lenny, all I could think of was he really needs Miguel and not me.
Well,
so I was there in, you know, like protesting in front of the Corcoran when the Mapplethorpe exhibit was canceled. So I would say that. And then my only other question, I guess, is really just an invitation to everyone to please join me in doing some activism to push back against the book bans, to make sure that women have the right to make decisions about their own bodies and their health care, that artists and arts workers can benefit from policies where they can live a human life and not kill themselves doing that, and that we all vote against fascism in the next presidential election. So I please just invite you all to join me on that.
That is a great place for us to end, good friends. This is not a period for art's sake. The pendulum is swinging back on us. So we have to work for progress. Thank you all so very much for joining us. We must always thank the Dauphin County Library System and our good partners in the development of this Chester Cultural Center. We are building a place for dialogue and access where thought is the product also, the process and the product also. So you help us along. This series will be posted on our Chester Research Center collection and available for you to share with your colleagues. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for coming out. I never know who's there, but I feel you. I feel you. So God bless you till we meet again, good friends, and have a good night.
Thank you all. Be safe.
Be safe. Thank you. Yes. Kim Chan's presentation.